On this channel, over the past few weeks and months, we have talked a lot about how all these new GPUs that are being released are experiencing such poor reception. Despite sales for consumer graphics cards dropping so low, the GPUs themselves have barely dropped in price, if at all. And unfortunately, I don't think the prices will be dropping drastically anytime soon. Let's discuss that in this video. Hey, if you enjoy content like this, drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and smash that bell so you never miss another video. Hey, what is going on guys, Danny here, welcome back to the channel and I hope you've all been doing well. We're now several months into the life cycle for the current generation graphics cards from Nvidia and AMD, those being the RTX 40 series and RX 7000 series respectively. Despite the RTX 4090 being a little over 7 months old, the rest of the lineup still hasn't hit the market. The same can also be said for AMD. Actually, they're in a more dire situation, as all we've gotten from them so far are their higher end enthusiast class GPUs. There was a leaked photo circulating around the internet not too long ago of an RX 7600, which will be their mainstream graphics card for this generation, although that still leaves a large gap in between as there's no sign of an RX 7700 XT or 7800 XT to compete with the RTX 4070 or 4070 Ti. Anyways, that's besides the point. The main reason I wanted to make this video was to give you guys an overview and update of the GPU market, at least here in North America, and talk about pricing. If you were hoping or wondering whether low sales in the GPU market, as well as the negative reception surrounding these new graphics cards, would force manufacturers to lower prices, well, unfortunately, I've got some bad news for you because the prices haven't really changed all that much since these cards have hit the market, and if there were any sort of discounts or deals, it mainly came from the retailer side. One of the reasons as to why I was prompted on making this video is because I saw this article over on WCCF Tech where they talked about how Nvidia and AMD graphics cards in China have dropped 20% below MSRP. I'll have a link to their article in the video description if you want to read the whole thing yourself. In one section of the article, an example they showed was an aftermarket model from Manli, who are a well-known AIB in the Chinese market. This specific model had its price dropped 22.1% below MSRP, bringing its USD equivalent pricing down to 1060, which is still a heck of a lot of money, but considerable nonetheless. And at the time they had posted the article, that was about $50 cheaper than the cheapest model you could find in the US. Therefore, I wanted to take a look for myself and see how things are essentially faring here, and if the North American market has improved in the same way. Before we discuss why this is happening, I wanted to show you guys some of the listings of the graphics cards from popular retailers. Starting from the top, we have the RTX 4090, and what's interesting with this particular GPU is that it's been the only new card that has received positive attention from reviewers, myself included. Main reason being it didn't receive a huge price hike when compared to its predecessor, the RTX 3090. It was only a $100 jump when comparing MSRPs. However, this jump in performance was very significant. A couple months ago, I made a video showcasing both my 3090 and 4090, so you can check that video out if you want to, see the different benchmarks, but on average, at 4K, I found it to be about 64% faster, but the average result was skewed a bit because I had included CSGO, and in actuality, it was more or less like 70 to 80% faster. For a gen-on-gen improvement, when that price has only gone up by 7%, that is a massive update. Looking at listings for different 4090 models from AIBs, you will notice that most of the models are still above MSRP, and we can only see one model that has fallen below. Given what we just talked about, this isn't surprising to see. Despite its crazy high price tag, it's done fairly well for an enthusiast grade GPU. Here in Canada, at the time of making this video, the MSRP for the 4090 converts to around $2154, and you can actually find some new models selling for below that. Or if you want to take your chances on open box, then the discounts there are even larger. Still crazy expensive though. Moving on, we have the 4080, a GPU that I said is actually good because it provides a decent gen-on-gen improvement over the RTX 3080. We're looking at around a 50% improvement on average, depending on where you look at your benchmarks from, so I'd say that was acceptable. Where the problem comes in is with its price. It's received a 72% increase over last gen, which is definitely not justifiable. Had it also had a $100 or even a $150 increase if we're to be generous, I don't think anybody would have been really complaining about this GPU. Though that's not what happened. Over on Newegg, the cheapest model I could find was the XLR8 gaming model, which is listed for $1179, but also has a a promo code for an additional $60 off, bringing it down to $1,119 US. Along with that, you do also get Diablo 4 bundled with it, which I guess adds a bit of extra value if you were going to buy it anyways. We're essentially looking at a 7% drop in MSRP, which is nothing to write home about, and even if we got a 20% drop like the Chinese market did, I still wouldn't get excited. At $900, the 4080 isn't absurd as before, but also isn't great. At $800, it's a good card, but I doubt we'll even get there, and even $960 is a stretch for the North American market. $100 is as far as I can see it dropping. In Canada, again, we see the cards are listed for slightly below the Canadian MSRP, but they're not selling that well. You can actually find the Founders Edition of the 4080 on stock on Best Buy Canada's website, but not the 4090, which just goes to show you how undesirable this GPU is here. After that, we have the RTX 4070 Ti, and this card doesn't just have a problem with its pricing, but also its branding, which is comical considering Nvidia already rebranded this card as it was formerly known as a 4080 12GB. Based on the specs and performance we got, this GPU at best is an RTX 4070 and shouldn't have been sold for more than $599 or $649 if you want to bump up for inflation. In my opinion, Nvidia shouldn't have bothered with the 4070 Ti SKU. At $599 and with the branding of just a 4070, this card would have actually been pretty decent, considering it can offer performance that's comparable to a 3090 in some games, so it would have followed the same footsteps as a 3070. Now, as far as pricing, and again, I'm using Newegg here since they're the most accessible. I know you can probably find some lower prices at places like Micro Center or other local shops, but not everyone lives close by one. Looking at the current gen pricing and stats, not much has changed since launch. Only a couple models are available at MSRP, whereas most models are considerably above that. And since we're on that subject, I'll just tell you guys right now, there's no reason to get the AIB models that are more expensive than MSRP. They won't impact your performance in any meaningful way. Sure, the cooler might be a bit better or it'll have more RGB, but the benefits are so minimal that I would suggest just get whatever is the cheapest at the time. Regardless, we can see plenty of models have been in stock, and yet no real movement has happened to its price. Interestingly, here in Canada, prices for the 4070 Ti have been slightly above the $1,071 MSRP, with most models hovering around $1,100 or more. Never thought X70 class GPUs would be costing over $1,000 Canadian dollars, and that would become the norm, yet here we are. The latest GPU to have entered the 40 series lineup is the 4070, a card that faced the same problem as its larger variant, the 4070 Ti. This card should have been a 4060 Ti and should not have been more than $400 or $450. Though, as I've pointed out in the past, the further down we go into the 40 series stack, the more inferior the GPUs become. Since this card hasn't been on the market for too long, I'm not surprised to see that prices haven't changed drastically. Though you can find numerous models in stock at MSRP, and that also seems to be the case up here north. I guess at the very least we have GPUs in stock, whereas 2 years ago, not only was everything overpriced, but it was nearly impossible to find anything in stock. Shifting our focus away from Nvidia and looking at AMD's Radeon GPUs, the situation here is mildly better, but definitely not anywhere close to where it should be. To start off with, the RX 7900 XTX, which launched at $999 MSRP, has most of its models relatively close to that with no big discounts. Not too surprising to see, as this card was received positively by the tech press because it offers performance comparable to the 4080 in terms of pure rasterization and is like $200 cheaper overall, but that's about it. If you want to play games with ray tracing, if you do any content creation, you want to dive into other sectors of computing like machine learning, you buy Nvidia, simple as that. However, for the RX 7900 XT, which was called out for being an upsell product, we have seen the price of this GPU decline noticeably, with the cheapest model on Newegg selling for $760, so that is a 50% drop. Here in Canada, the RX 7000 series are still selling for around MSRP or even above that, and typically AMD GPUs sell for above the conversion rate here, which sucks for AMD, as that's been one of the main reasons why Nvidia will continue to remain more dominant. Definitely an interesting market, because these past few months regarding the current generation have been nothing short of just depressing. Most of the reviews for these cards have been underwhelming and or negative. The reception from consumers has been really low. Along with that, retailers have been posting low figures and have been trying various tactics to get people's foot in the door, like discounts, part bundles, combos, or even gift cards. Nvidia and AMD themselves have reported drops in sales figures compared to previous quarters. When you see all that, you'd think that the prices would be dropping, but that hasn't been the case, and prices have remained stagnant for the most part. I personally think the main reason for this is simply because these manufacturers don't have to drop prices. When you have a market that is controlled by a monopoly and another manufacturer that is only pretending to compete, then they can do whatever they want. Intel is way too new right now and couldn't even hold a candle next to Nvidia. They might take some market share from AMD, but they didn't even have that much of a market capture to begin with, therefore it's negligible. Right now, these manufacturers are still sitting on a boatload of inventory from the previous generation, and what's also noteworthy is that last gen Nvidia stuff, at least for the models that are still in stock that is, they're not that much cheaper than MSRP, if at all. Brand new 3070s that are still sold and shipped by Newegg are higher than MSRP. It just makes no sense to buy. You're better off going to a third-party local used market or going on eBay and finding something used. eBay and PayPal have good buyer protection. They're very buyer-sided as opposed to favoring the sellers, so you can have confidence with your purchase should something go wrong, and worst case scenario, if you paid with a credit card, then you've also got some insurance there. But what happens when the supply for last gen parts runs out? Then these manufacturers will be in an even more comfortable position since consumers will have no other choice but these options. They're playing the market exactly how they're supposed to be, keeping the prices high and margins high, weathering out the economic storm for as long as possible, which they can afford to. Then once the recovery happens and people start looking at buying again, they've still got those high prices set, and if anything, they can raise them back up as an excuse for keeping up with the quote-unquote increased demand. One of the ways Nvidia is weathering this out is by focusing on higher-end clientele, HPC, and the data center. DigiTimes recently reported that Nvidia has boosted its order for wafers at TSMC to support the growth and demand for AI GPUs. These GPUs have a ton of margin, and Nvidia would rather move a small volume of these very high margin parts as opposed to focusing on the mainstream consumer segment with parts that pale in comparison with their margins. This is the new norm. If you thought that down the road we'll see drastically cheaper prices as a reaction to the current state of the gaming market, then I temper your expectations. If they do drop it, it won't be anything drastic. There'll probably be deals or promotions from the retailer side, and like I said, they could very well even raise prices. On the flip side, the good news is that there aren't too many games coming out that are even worth playing or warrant the high processing power of these GPUs, so if you're still sitting on a card from last gen or even a couple gens older, then you should be in a comfortable position to keep running with it until you find that one game where you actually need to upgrade. I personally wouldn't pay these high prices and would rather just continue to lower settings, use things like FSR and DLSS to maintain good performance, especially if you are playing older games so it's not all doom and gloom. If you guys found this video to be informative and entertaining, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Be sure to check out the video description for cool links and ways to support the channel, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, then consider subscribing. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.